You son of a bitch, you shot the wrong man.
A peaceful, easy night between friends ends with a fatal gunshot wound. Was he the target? Who was the one that pulled the trigger?
You went there with the purpose of killing JR, and you shot and killed the wrong man.
The moon shone brightly that summer night. It was late August in rural Fulton County, Arkansas, the perfect place for those looking to live the quiet life. A place where everyone knew everyone, where no one needed to worry. Leon King Jr., or JR as he was called, spent the day with his friend David Stone. His friends called him Stoney. They ended the night by going up to King's trailer house after a good day of hunting.
Me and my friend Stoney, we'd been out, killed a turkey and was cooking it and killed a deer.
A peaceful, easy night. Or was it?
Yeah, I can still see it, man. I'm sitting there in the living room, which you can see just like that right there in the kitchen. He said, man, I'm being shot. I looked around and said, do what?
King says Stoney was always one to play pranks, so at first he thought Stoney was simply messing with him.
Well, I went over and I thought he was joking, still joking, till he raised his shirt up and I seen the bullet hole. He was still standing there, no blood or nothing. He didn't bleed.
As reality set in, Stoney collapsed to the floor. Fueled with emotions, King ran out to find the shooter.
You son of a bitch, you shot the wrong man. I went running out the door and I looked and I couldn't hear a car. I didn't hear nothing. I went back in the house and I called 911.
As first responders made their way to the scene, King sat by Stone's side.
He said, I ain't gonna make it this time.
Responders flew Stone to Springfield, Missouri, where he died. Almost immediately following the shooting, an investigation began.
The sheriff's office got a call. Actually, I think the call went into the Sharp County Sheriff's Department, and then they called over here and let them know, and they dispatched deputies down there and found that David Stone had been shot.
Arkansas State Police, along with Sheriff's Office, conducted the investigation, looking to find out who pulled the trigger.
That night, they found some evidence of where a vehicle had pulled over on Mulberry Road that was just west of the J.R. King's residence, as well as what looked like combat boot tracks that was leading down to the trailer.
But one thing that stunned everyone.
And it didn't break the window, it didn't even crack the window. Perfect round hole.
As investigators continued to gather evidence, one thing on everyone's mind: who pulled the trigger?
I knew who done it. I mean, there wasn't no doubt in my mind. I mean, I knew the bunch that done it.
Now, the year before, in December, King got into a fight with brothers Daryl and David Birch. One particular incident ended with a trip to the hospital.
J.R. King beat the tar out of David Birch, put him in the hospital.
David's daughter said he took a beer can and used it to try to hit King.
Everybody was out in the yard, sitting around talking, and he took a beer like this right here and shoved it, hit me underneath the nose. And I just had enough room that I was still sitting down. I had enough room for it didn't cut my nose off, and I whooped him. But then we went to court later on, and over me whooping him.
Court documents show that David Birch filed assault and battery charges on King, but the judge ended up finding King not guilty and ordered him to pay David's medical bills.
So many people, investigators and other folks that knew some of the people involved, even from the community, they thought Daryl Birch did it.
But if the altercation was between King and the Birch brothers, where did Stone come into play? Why was he the one shot?
And I guess he didn't realize David was there. If he did, he didn't choose his target very well.
Through interviews with several people, deputies learned on the night of the shooting, two men approached a lake house. And who lived just on the other side of that lake? J.R. King. Come to find out that the two men who went to the lake house, Daryl and his friend, Dennis Kingston. In the records, it says Daryl and Dennis went out to the lake to go fishing and zero in a rifle that belonged to Daryl. Practicing with the rifle, late at night, at the pond where the man who painfully beat your brother calls home. It all starts to line up, doesn't it?
Even his brother David, whenever the officers interviewed him later, 2 days after this happened, he told them then that that Darrell had told him he'd take care of it. But he said he didn't think about him shooting him, he just thought about he would confront him about it.
When detectives eventually interviewed Darrell, he denied the whole thing, right down to having the rifle with him, claiming it had been stolen. And with that, the trail went cold.
Whoever shot Stoney's still out there.
Time moved forward. Investigators worked together as much as they could, but unfortunately, leads can only go so far.
They did a lot of work, but they, as you said, they got to be a point, things just kind of dropped off.
Eventually, everyone involved in this case moved on, from changing careers to retiring. For a time being, the mysterious case of who killed David Stoney Stone was left a mystery, until 19 years later, when a fresh set of eyes took a look at the case. Detective Dale Weaver took over the case in 2023. Now, when it first happened all those years ago, he knew of it, but only through rural county talk.
And I was sheriff over in Sharp County whenever this happened back in 2004. And I'm sure I heard about it like, rural counties, and if you're next door, you're probably going to hear about a homicide.
Since then, he's retired from the sheriff life, but he still kept in touch and came in to help with some new investigators, eventually landing him a part-time spot at the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, getting to work solely on cold cases.
But I was pretty well left alone to do my thing and to investigate this case, and so I was giving the freedom to do it, and I've still had that, so I thank them for giving me that opportunity.
And after nearly 2 decades of being left untouched, the case came to life once again.
If you look at the case file and read through, and one of the first things that you do on a cold case as an investigator is to get everything that's out there that's been done on it. Somebody else has poured the foundation. They've put the foundation out there. I'm just building on it.
Weaver continued on with the investigations, pouring through the decades worth of information, revisiting past clues that could hopefully lead them to find Stone's killer.
Well, Dale Weaver come here and wanted to talk to him. He got my statement and see if I could give him any more information.
And with enough clues, this cold case got a bit warmer. When?
And Dale was letting me know, he said, I've got him. I said, who you got?
Dennis Kingston.
That's when I opened my eyes. Dennis. Here I knew he lived there, knew he was one of the boys, but I never dreamed him.
Pouring through the foundation, Weaver looked through each pillar to see where any cracks could lie.
I think the first interview I did on the case was sometime January 23. Reviewing all the case file, I saw 2 things that really stood out to me.
That fateful day in May when King beat David Birch, they weren't alone. Kingston stood behind them all for the entire incident.
A lot of the people was thinking that Darrell Birch had done this. And so I think they had focused on Darrell. And when I read that case file and saw all of these threats that Dennis had made, I thought, I think, that needs to be followed up on.
And all the way to the day of the verdict.
One statement was taken from Leah Birch, who was David's daughter. And Leah stated that the day or the night that her father, David, got back from the hospital, and that Darrell and Dennis Kingston was sitting there talking about what had happened. And Dennis was real angry and wanted to go kill JR that night. And instead of doing that, Darrell talked him out of it. He said, we don't want to do this now. We'll take care of this later.
It stunned me. It really did. It stunned me.
But why? What would Dennis have to gain from shooting a man? Everyone we spoke to described Dennis as a quiet guy, that this was rather uncharacteristic of him.
I'm not sure that he was that quick to anger, generally speaking. Never heard anybody else say that. I think that he thought so much of David Birch. I've wondered if that had happened to him, what he would have done. But it happened to his friend. And that's what made him so angry enough to kill somebody. And he went there with the purpose of murdering J.R. King.
Unfortunately for him, the man he slain, dying in a pool of his own blood, was the wrong man caught in the crosshairs.
David had done nothing to any of them, hadn't wronged them in any way. He was just a friend of J.R.'s and happened to be there and was shot as a result.
A man, a friend, a husband, and a father, ripped away from his family, all from the pull of a trigger.
I said, Dennis, this family, David Stone's family, they didn't deserve this. They've had no closure. They've lived with this for almost 20 years now. And you've had 20 years of freedom. Don't you think that it's time to tell the truth and let them get a little closure out of this?
Dennis pleaded guilty. 30 years on murder in the first degree.
And he's 65 years old. He's 66 now, I believe, but he was 65, I think, at the time whenever he was arrested. And so with 30 years, as much time as you serve on a Class Y, that's probably a life sentence for him.
Now, Dennis sits behind bars for his crimes. And as for the Birch brothers, they've both passed on.
I wish they could have done something earlier, 20 years ago, you know. All three of them needed something.
And as for Stone's family, we reached out to them to see if they would like to sit down with us. They said they'd like to put this part of their life behind them, not to reopen any old wounds. J.R. King lives back in Manila, where he and Stoney grew up together. Despite losing his life in Salem, King says Stoney, he's still with him.
I woke up, sitting up on the couch, and he said, "Girl, don't worry about me no more. I'm in a good place." And it eased me. It was real. It was real.